the Lightning Process podcast. Using the tools of the mind-body connection for health and happiness. Hi, welcome. Dr. Phil here. Welcome to this Christmas edition of the Lightning Process podcast. So Christmas is a super interesting time for many people because it should be a time of joy and excitement and celebration and connection and family. And for some people, it just isn't. For some people, it's a time of absence where people that you love aren't there or you're disconnected from them in some way. Sometimes it can be the stress and pressure of trying to make this magical thing happen, getting everything in, spending the money, baking, arranging stuff, and trying to organize that can be massively overwhelming. So that's a problem a lot of people have. And then probably the third thing that people have is issues around overindulging. So that's overeating, overdrinking, maybe even overspending. So those are the cool things. I've got an audio you can check out on the website, philparker.org, about how to have a really happy Christmas dealing with some of these things. But let me just talk about one thing in particular, which is overwhelm. So if that's for you, that around Christmas time, you find just your head almost melting with the amount of things you've got to do, the people you've got to manage, preparation, and the pressure of it, then you are going to have a bit of a tricky time because those things are almost kind of fixed events. That's what happens every year. So what can we do about it? Well, there are luckily some really simple solutions for this very, very common problem. Very, very first thing is this. When we think about being overwhelmed, the way our brain processes things is, and this is even worse if you happen to have brain fog as well, because you have even less processing power when you have brain fog. But basically what we're doing is we have more things to think about than our brain can manage. Our brain, they reckon, can deal with about 7 pieces of information, roughly. So 7 pieces of information we have to juggle. That's the space we've got within our brain. More than that, and it's just too much. So what do? When we find ourselves being overwhelmed, there's a very interesting structure that occurs, which is we have more information than we can possibly process. And so our brain flips between, I've got to deal with this, and I've got to deal with that, but I've also got to deal with that, and that, and that, and that. And this overloads us because it's more than this magic number of about 7. And if you ask someone, how are you thinking about these things, you'll see some very interesting things. Just check it out in your mind. If you think about you being overwhelmed about anything, it could be Christmas or something else. When you think about all these things, they'll show up in a particular way. The first thing you'll notice is that they are appearing and disappearing. So you see one and you see another. And then the other thing that happens is that they start to move. It's almost like there's a sandstorm or a snowstorm of whirling pieces of information. You're trying to look at one, but another one distracts you, and they're moving around. And this makes it really, really difficult. Usually also, they're slightly above our eye line. It's like there's lots of them. If you just mimic this with your hands, so if you're watching the video, you'll be able to see my hands moving. If you're listening to it, what you're thinking about is put one hand in front of your right eye, one hand in front of your left eye, and then move them around so they cross over and they swirl around. Move your hands, having them getting closer and closer and above you, and move faster and faster in a kind of circle. And try and keep your focus on one particular thumb or finger as they're moving around. That's what overwhelmed feels like. It's like, it's just too much information. I can't process that. Please make it stop. And this is when we shut down. We go, I cannot do this. And you reach for the glass of wine or lie down or the pills or whatever it is that gets you through the day. And this gives us a clue as to how we can stop overwhelm. So if you just mimic again this movement of the hands moving around in front of you, getting above your head, I'll just do it towards the camera. So it's kind of like this, coming at you like that. And then when this happens, just start to slow your hands down physically. So they're moving slower, like slow-mo, and then get them to a point where they just stop. So you slowed it down so they stop. Notice also how my voice has changed and become slower. Have your inner voice change. Instead of going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's like, okay, right. So we're just slowing down. And when we freeze it, then we're left with pieces of information, but now they're still. That's going to help. The next thing we want to do is focus on just one. It doesn't really matter which one it is. Just choose one, have that be in your central focus, and have everything else move to the side. So there's just one thing to look at. This part of our brain, this space in front of us, is our most valued neurological real estate. So anything in there gets our attention. So move these other things to the side. So there's just one thing to deal with, which may be buying a present for my kid. That's the first thing. Okay, so we do that. We action that. And when we've done it, it's done. We don't need that anymore. Now we've got one less thing. So we can take the next thing and move that into this space in front of us and have a look at it. What's the next thing? Okay, I've got to buy a turkey. Or if you're vegetarian like me, some veggie sausages. Okay, so, okay, do that. You do that. Once you've done that, you move that to one side. And just by doing this, being able to stop the swirl, which is what causes the overwhelm, and then prioritizing and focusing on one task at a time, because in spite of what everybody says, we are not multitaskers as humans. We can only really do one task at a time. Do that task, put it to one side, get the next one up. If you do that, you will find you really reduce that sense of overwhelm and get a sense of empowerment, strategic thinking, calmness. There are lots of other things you can do, and these are all on the audio that you can get hold of how to have a really stress-free Christmas. But there's loads of other things you can do. But if you just start by reducing your overwhelm, increasing your sense of calmness, that will make so much of a difference. So if you're listening to this around Christmas, have a fabulous Christmas. Remember to think about, what do I want for this Christmas? Not in terms of gifts, but how do I want to be? What state do I want to be in? That'll probably be the biggest gift you can give yourself at Christmas. The sense of, I choose to be this way, to feel this way, to process all this stuff from this state, from this space. And have a great Christmas, and I'll speak to you in the new year. The Lightning Process Podcast. Using the tools of the mind-body connection for health and happiness. If you'd like to know more, please visit us at lightningprocess.co.uk.